This is an Aristides H06. It came out around 2020, 2021 time. It's considered a very technically advanced, modern, innovative guitar. And this is a Parker Fly. It came out in the 1990s, and at the time, it was considered to be one of the most extreme and unique and innovative guitar designs. Now, the question is, with basically 30 years separating these two designs, 1990, 2020, have we really gotten better at making modern, innovative guitars? Well, we're going to talk about that today. And just so you know, if you're looking for deep dive reviews of each of these guitars, I have separate videos on that where you can hear the tones. Today, we're not even playing guitar. We're just talking about design, chilling out, hopefully having a good time. So let's start by just talking about the manufacturing of the guitar and the shape and what it's made out of, because this is really, really interesting. Since these were made in the 2020s, they're very influenced by the modern designs of today, which are largely influenced by Strandberg and other headless guitars. So of course we have a headless design. We have basically the Strandberg body with a few slight alterations. And we have the guitar that's made entirely of non-wood materials, different types of composites. So to make this guitar, they start with an exoskeleton that they layer inside of a mold. And then of course you add on the fretboard, which in this case is Richlite, stainless steel frets and all of the hardware and so on, maybe painted. And that's the way that these guitars are made. Now, the interesting thing about Parker guitars is that there is a big misconception that these guitars don't have any wood. And, you know, I've met Ken Parker. I spoke to him for several hours. We email every once in a while. He is very much a tone wood guy. If you don't know, he started his career making archtop guitars. Then he started making electric guitars. And after he stopped making electric guitars, he went right back to making his archtop guitars. So this is a luthier who's really, really in love with wood and acoustic instruments. And, you know, I won't get into the tone wood debate here. I will say that he has a lot of very compelling stories to explain how and why tone wood is a thing. And there's also a university right now that's doing a real peer-reviewed academic study on tone wood. And I won't spoil their results since it hasn't been published yet, but let's just say Ken Parker may have been right about tone wood really being a thing, much to my shock as well, because I'm not someone who ever believed in it either. Anyway, so each Parker Fly is made entirely of wood, but then they have their proprietary carbon fiber glass epoxy material thing that they would wrap around the body and bake it on there. And the fact that they were doing that and putting this on guitars in the early 90s is frankly insane if you think about it. Keep in mind that if we're talking about design and manufacturing, a design that comes out in the early 90s is influenced mostly by 80s technology. This is before we were doing 3D printing in our bedrooms and all of that stuff. And this is before carbon fiber was as widely available. And if you don't know, wood is a fairly easy material to work with. You know, you have a desk at home. If you hit your desk too hard, you get a chip in it. So you can imagine that trying to sculpt a piece of wood is fairly simple once you have the requisite skills. Trying to work with carbon fiber is a big pain. There's all of these sharp splinters that come off of it. You need different tools, so on and so forth. So again, the fact that they were engineering this out of wood, but then wrapping it in carbon fiber in the 90s, and to me, that's completely insane. One other thing we should note here is that, just like I mentioned now with the Aristides guitar, that body shape was very much influenced by the modern guitars of today, which are largely headless and inspired by the Strandberg design. As you can see here, this is inspired by a Super Strat. So, you know, it came out in the early 90s, influenced by 80s guitars. It's essentially just a Super Strat style body. So while I have the Parker in my hand, let's continue to talk about the headstock since Aristides doesn't have a headstock anyway. So one of the few things on its guitar that Ken Parker didn't design himself was the tuners. So these are just normal Spurzell locking tuners. 30 years old, they still work perfectly fine, so that was a good choice. And then, of course, we have this headstock that's very, very polarizing. I think it looks awesome. And the interesting thing here is that we get rid of all of the excess wood from the guitar. So, you know, usually a headstock has wood in this area right here. And Ken Parker's basically like, well, we don't need that wood for anything. We don't need it for stability or rigidity because we have it wrapped in carbon fiber. We might as well just get rid of all of that extra weight. So that piece of wood is gone. And that's how we get this interesting headstock design. The funny thing about this headstock is that just about every Parker Fly owner, if you look at the tip of the headstock right up here, you will find very, very small or sometimes very large chips because For some reason, this headstock, the top of it gets smacked on everything all the time. I don't know why, but it just does. You smack it into things all the time and you get little chips in it. So another charm of the Parker Fly guitar. Something else that's pretty cool is that we have the truss rod adjustment right down right there. You can't see it because it's black, but the truss rod adjustment is right inside there in front of the guitar. Similarly, actually, when we look at the Aristides guitar, the truss rod adjustment is the same place, right at the headstock, or lack of headstock in this case. So we have that difference with these two instruments. Now, when we look at the whole fretboard neck situation for the Aristides guitar, we have a rich light fretboard, which is a composite material made out of different types of paper and wood fibers, I believe. And then we have the stainless steel frets right on top of there. I believe they use Jescar stainless steel frets, but I'll put an annotation if I'm incorrect there. And we have a fan fret design here. Again, fan frets, very popular in the 2010s and into the 2020s. So we have that influence here. And rich light has also been growing in popularity because of its stability. And then for the neck, we have a fairly thin neck. I would say, a modern C or even a modern thin C neck. And it's basically unfinished. So you're feeling the actual material right underneath the neck. And it's pretty comfortable. It has a very, very nice transition from the neck to the body because there's no wood to worry about there. And so we have that beautiful design there, which I really, really love about this guitar. And before we look at the Parker Fly's neck, I want to point out one thing right here, which you can actually look at on your own guitar. When you look at your guitar from the side, you'll see a very clear indication of where the fretboard stops and where the neck starts. It's like, maybe half an inch or so of fretboard material usually, and then we see the neck. Now, when you look closely at a Parker Fly guitar, you will notice that that doesn't exist there whatsoever. We basically just have neck. And then on the front of the guitar, there's a piece of, I believe it's a piece of carbon fiber that the frets are glued on top of. So you can imagine you have a finished guitar wrapped in this exoskeleton, and then you take a thin sheet of carbon fiber, which is like as thin as a sheet of paper pretty much, with the frets glued on, and you secure that to the body itself. I'm sorry if I'm messing up the order in which these things were done, but I'm trying to give you a visual to understand what this is actually like. So when you look at the guitar from this side, you don't actually see a fretboard because there really is just that thin piece of carbon fiber. And I don't think satin or unfinished necks were as popular prior to the 2010s. And as a result, in the 90s, we had mostly gloss necks from what I understand. And so this is a gloss finish on the neck. It's a nice gloss. Again, this has been around for 30 years. It hasn't faded. It hasn't had any issues. So it's definitely a nice gloss finish. The neck is also, of course, very thin, like the whole Shredder 80s thing. And then we have stainless steel frets. Now, the fact that we have stainless steel frets on a guitar that's from the early 90s is frankly insane. The fact that they only offered stainless steel throughout all of the Parker guitars is crazy. No one was doing that at the time. To have an entire guitar line with only stainless steel frets. And then on top of that, these were not like stainless steel frets you can buy from a major company. I believe that they had to source these themselves or make them themselves. So that was a huge, huge unique thing at the time. And, still today it's fairly unique. Also, the nut is, of course, a composite nut, but you'll see that it's a special shape. This was designed specifically for this guitar. So as I go on to explain the different features of this guitar that are quite unique, you're also going to get basically the explanation for why the company ultimately failed. Ken Parker explains this all the time. Basically, they were making a guitar that cost $10,000 to make. Between all of the materials, all the uniqueness, all the building procedures, it took $10,000 to make each one of these guitars, and they were selling it for $3,000. So as you can imagine, that's a very poor business plan. Almost like buying a bunch of very expensive guitars to review on YouTube when YouTube pays almost no money for those reviews. Also a very dumb business plan. Anyway, so let's talk about the hardware and the electronics on the Aristides guitar, because in my opinion, this is where Aristides got something, spot on. This was a really, really great idea that they do now. So of course you can get any electronics you want. And to me, that is a huge deal. If you want EMGs, you get EMGs. If you want Bare knuckles, you get bare knuckles. Seymour Duncans, you get the idea. Any pickups you want, any wiring configuration you want, and they'll all, of course, do that themselves at a very high quality. And I think that's a really great feature about these guitars and a lot of other modern guitars today. The vibrato is made by Hatung, and it's extremely high quality, and it feels great. I can't really find a headless tremolo system that I like more than this one. And you'll see that it's also a multi-scale tremolo to match the fan fret, which is pretty cool as well. And then, of course, on the back, we have this really nice clear cavity so you can see everything inside of there. It's actually funny because I think it was also in the 90s when this was very popular. Like, you'd be able to get a Game Boy as an example. You can get this see-through case on it or whatever. So a little bit of that old modern design to have a see-through area so you can see all of the technology that's happening inside of the actual thing. So that's pretty cool. Something else interesting is that these guitars actually aren't, well, I mean, they're lightweight, but this is about 5 pounds, maybe a little bit more than 5 pounds. So, maybe 5.5 pounds. That's actually not the lightest weight headless guitar there is. In fact, Strandbergs are a bit lighter than these guitars. And even the Parker Fly is a lot lighter than the Aristides. Basically, the headless Aristides are above 5 pounds. The Parker Flies are below 5 pounds. And that may not seem like as big of a deal, but when you have a body that's this small, it feels heavy when it's 5 pounds. Whereas when you have a body that's this large with the neck and the headstock, and it's less than 5 pounds, it feels even lighter than it really is. So we're talking about maybe, 3/4 of a pound difference, but you actually feel the difference with each guitar, which is pretty cool. Now, in terms of the body, I already talked a little bit about the Aristides heel joint and that sculpting, which is great. It's just extremely comfortable. But the back of the guitar is actually, it's a little bit contoured. It's not rough. It's not uncomfortable, but it's not crazy sculpted. What I'm trying to say is that since they injection mold these guitars, you would think that they might have a lot of unique little features on the body to kind of take advantage of that injection molding. When you're making a guitar out of wood, every unique curve you have to carve or have CNC'd, whereas with an injection mold, you could just squirt it into the mold and it'll be any shape you want. So overall, I will say, considering how weird it could have been, it's a shockingly normal body. In fact, I would say that the Parker Fly body is actually much, much more unique. Of course, we have that amazing heel joint, similar to the Aristides, because, it's perfectly seamless, as you can see. But then, if you look closely at the Parker Fly guitar, there are so many little unique curves and nooks and crannies. Like when you look at the guitar from this angle, you see that the area between the neck and the body is like paper thin. If you just take your hand and open it up and put your finger, your other finger in between the webbing between your index finger and your thumb, that little webbing is almost like what it feels like on a Parker Fly guitar. It's just so thin and very organic feeling, if you will. And as you look on the back of the guitar, there's all of these nice little swoops on the top, over here. On the bottom, there's this little swoop on the bottom over here. And that little swoop goes all the way down towards the controls. So, man, there's just so many unique curves and crevices on this instrument, which I think it just makes the design very, very unique and very special. Even if you look at the lower horn, it's like a little triangle design on the lower horn, what it makes. So it's just a really unique design overall. It's also extremely thin at many spots. And then there's so much sculpting on the back of the guitar that when you have it against your body, it just really hugs your body in a really nice way. I will say that I agree with a lot of people who dislike the upper horn. I like the way it looks, but when you hold the guitar in like the nerdy guitar position, like I like to hold it in, that upper horn does dig into your chest, and it's not the most comfortable thing. But if you hold the guitar a little bit lower, and if you like play your guitar punk rock style, that's not going to matter at all. So I don't love that aspect of it, but it's just one of the Parker Fly quirks. Now, while we're talking about the thinness of the body, let's talk about these pickups. These are DiMarzios. Some of the other Parker Fly models had Seymour Duncan pickups, I believe. The interesting thing is that these bodies are so thin that they had to have custom thinner humbucker pickups to go inside of here. So even if you wanted to swap these out for other pickups, you can't do it. You'd have to have a custom made extra thin pickup to accommodate the extra thin body. Again, just some of the quirks of a Parker Fly guitar. And in terms of the original Parker Fly guitars, they were basically all humbucker. And so we also had in the bridge a piezo system. So we have a lot of different controls here to work with, okay? So we have our 3-way switch for our humbucker pickups, right? No coil splitting with each pickup. We don't have that here. Then we have a master volume and a master tone for the magnetic section. Then we have a stacked knob right here. So we can control the volume and the tone for the piezo bridge. Then we have this switch down here. And this switch determines whether or not you're going to have just the magnetic pickup, just the piezo, or the piezo and the magnetic pickup. And then we have one extra knob over here, which is a master volume that controls the entire output of the guitar. So basically you can set the volume and tone for your magnetic pickups, the volume and tone for your piezo bridge. And once you have that thing set, you can raise the global volume with this additional knob over here. So it's extremely well thought out, and there are a ton of tones you can find with this instrument. I will say that these DiMarzio pickups are very, very like 80s, 90s pickups. They're very bright. They're a bit nasally. When you have it, like the clean tone is just very bright and nasally. And the distorted sound is just, it's the tone you would want if you were going to do a dive bomb into like a squeal. It's the perfect tone for that. But, I don't love the tone of these pickups, but it's a Parker Fly from the 90s. What are you going to do about it, right? Something really interesting about this guitar is also the bridge here, because this is probably one of the best bridges ever invented, but it's also one of the most problematic bridges ever invented. So first, let's just take out this whammy bar here, which is pretty cool because you'll see it's shaped like an Allen wrench. So it feels unique there. So apart from the really cool vibrato arm that's shaped like an Allen wrench, the bridge itself is unique for a few different reasons. Number one, you can set it right on the back of the guitar. There's a switch back here. So you can set it to be either completely hardtail, bend down only, or fully floating. And that's amazing for doing string changes. If you just want to be able to down tune, you can hit that switch and then you're fine there, which is great. In terms of adjusting the height of the bridge, instead of doing it from the top with like 2 different screws, you actually do it from behind. And the Allen wrench screws are right there and right there. And something that's really cool about that is if you ever try to adjust a regular 2-point tremolo, it's recommended that you detune the guitar before you start turning the screw posts, because if you're constantly using those posts and turning into them under tension, and it's going to decrease the lifespan of the bridge just a little bit, right? So the first thing is that we don't have a knife edge at all to wear out. And since you're adjusting the height with these posts that are not in contact with a knife edge, you don't have to worry about adjusting it under tension and it being an issue. At least that I haven't had an issue with that. Maybe it's recommended that you don't do that, but I've adjusted it all the time with the strings at full tension, and I've never had an issue with that. So that's really cool as well. And then something else that's pretty cool is that you have this giant wheel here. This is not a wheel you're going to use very often. This is basically something that you're going to use to get things set up, and then it's probably going to stay there for the most part. But I just think that in terms of the design, it makes it kind of industrial, and it's just very cool to be able to highlight the function of the instrument right on the instrument itself rather than hiding that piece out there. The issue with these bridges is, of course, that they're no longer being made. And so if you have an issue with them, you're pretty much screwed. The Fly Clone project is doing some things to help get these parts available for people, so that's great. But one of the biggest issues has been the fact that these guitars don't use springs in the back. They use like a flat leaf instead of the normal springs. And so if you want to change from a spring made for 9s or 10s or 11s, you don't have it, they're really hard to find and they can be very expensive. Again, I think the Fly Clone project is making these more available, so that's great. But for a long time, if you played 9s and you needed to play 11s and you don't have the spring, You can't find it. It's just been an issue for people historically. So that's one of the issues with having a guitar that is made of basically exclusively proprietary parts, is that when that company goes away, how are you going to repair the instrument? The parts are no longer being made. That's been the issue with Parker Fly guitars after Parker Fly, the company, was gone. And there's a lot of other really cool things on this guitar. We have this little red push button switch that messes with the piezo bridge, turns it on or turns it off. The output jack itself doesn't have any screws. It's a very special thing for this guitar. Even the battery box itself is designed specifically for this guitar. They didn't just go buy a normal battery box for this instrument. So as you look around this guitar, you'll just see that it is extremely unique, and there's so many great features on it that make it stand out. So I just want to conclude by saying a few things about each instrument, because I think they're both great, but the Parker Fly really, I think, changed the design world for a few different reasons. If you think about the John Petrucci Majesty guitar, or any of John Petrucci's signature guitars with Ernie Ball Music Man, I believe those are actually the most sold signature guitars of all time. That might be incorrect, but I think it's either one or two. It's somewhere at the top. Those guitars have locking tuners, floating bridge. This guitar was one of the first to popularize the idea of not needing a Floyd Rose for dive bombing and things like that. Locking tuners, floating bridge, stays in tune amazingly well. Ernie Ball Music Man guitar, the John Petrucci ones, a lot of them also have piezo bridges. Piezo bridge. And if you look around nowadays, the idea of a floating bridge with locking tuners is so common. We see it everywhere on so many guitars across the world. And I think, in my opinion, I can't prove this, but I think that's the influence of the Parker Fly and popularizing this as a system for tremolo bridges, vibrato bridges, whichever you want to say, whammy bars, whatever. Then, of course, we have the stainless steel frets. I was born in 1992, so I was a baby when this company came out. Stainless steel frets only got popular in the last 10 to 15 years while I was a guitar player. I was a baby when they were first put on Parker Fly guitars. I say this sometimes on other videos of Parker Flies, but I challenge you to find another company. Because keep in mind, the Parker Fly has stainless steel frets and the Night Fly has stainless steel frets. So I challenge you to find another guitar company that in the 90s was using exclusively stainless steel frets on their instruments. I can't find one. Maybe you can. So the stainless steel frets are obviously extremely influential. We see them all the time today. The composite fretboard, now we're using Richlight all the time. The whole exoskeleton and wrapping the guitar in some type of, carbon fiber or some type of other material. We see that as well on Aristides. We see it on other instruments as well. Popularized by the Parker Fly guitar. I'm not trying to say that Ken Parker invented all of this stuff. He definitely didn't invent carbon fiber. He didn't invent stainless steel frets, but to take all of those unique design aspects and put them together on one instrument and make it available to the public for a fairly reasonable price, $3,000 in 1990, 1992, still pretty expensive. Actually, it was 1993. $3,000 in 1993, pretty expensive, but it wasn't, a $20,000 handmade custom guitar for each individual person. So to mass produce these guitars, pretty amazing. And the fact that in terms of tuning stability and reliability, they still hold up today is incredible. If you go online and you try to buy a Parker Fly guitar, you're bound to find a few, like mine, that is literally perfect and pristine. But you'll also find a bunch that have rips in the paint, that have checking all over, that have, extra drill holes that people wanted to mess with. And, I've played some of those Parker Flies as well, and they still feel great. They still have amazing tuning stability. They still feel great, So it's like, even if you ruin this pristine body by, damaging it, the guitar still holds up just fine, and it still plays, and it still has great tuning stability. And of course, one amazing thing about having these stainless steel frets glued onto a composite material is that there's nothing to expand or shrink or contract. You'll never have fret sprout on this guitar. I will say that one complaint that I've seen is the stainless steel frets being glued on. Apparently, a lot of people have had issues with the frets falling off. To the best of my knowledge, that happened even more once the company was sold and manufacturing tried to make the process cheaper and less less high quality. Let's just say it what it was. But I know there are people who have the old school fly guitars who also had that issue. So I'm not trying to say that that's never happened. I'm just saying for me personally, I've had many fly guitars, Parker fly guitars. I've had night fly guitars. I've never had anything with the frets issues in terms of them falling off. I do live in the Northeast. We do get around 100 degrees in the summer. The basement that I'm in right now, where these guitars are stored, does not have air conditioning. So it can be above 100 degrees or 100 degrees in this basement. And again, I've never had the frets fall off or get loose or anything like that. So yeah, I'm acknowledging it as an issue, but I've never experienced it myself. One issue that people say about the Aristides guitars that I've never personally experienced myself, some people say that these guitars, if you leave them in a cold space and then you go to play them, as your body and your hands warm up the instrument, the tuning stability slips. I tried testing it. I couldn't replicate it, but I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying I've personally never experienced it myself. And I guess my closing summary of the Aristides guitar is that I don't think it's as revolutionary as the Parker Fly was, and that's probably a good thing. The Parker Fly was so revolutionary that they couldn't make money off of it. And at the end of the day, as much as it sucks, we're all artists. A luthier is an artist. A musician is an artist, obviously. We all want to make art, but if our art doesn't make money, we can't make art. So it's a shame that these guitars, the Parker Flies, were so special that they couldn't actually find a large enough audience to make the company profitable. And I think that's where Aristides is lucky to be in the time that they're in. With the internet, with the online guitar communities, with the online guitar market, it's a lot easier to reach a wider audience with a smaller company. Back in Ken Parker's days, you had to have your guitar, for the most part, in a big box store, like a Guitar Center, like a Sam Ash. Now, you don't have to even worry about having a retailer. You can just go direct from your shop and sell your instruments with the customizations. And that also gives them the ability to add all of these unique customizations, be it pickups or inlays or paint jobs, things like that. And so the buying process is much more intimate and it's much more modern and more special for today's guitarist. So I think Aristides did a smart thing by making bodies that are fairly normal, but still unique. So we have a Strandberg body, which in 2023 is pretty much normal, but they also have strap bodies and they also have telly bodies. And then they just add the uniqueness of the injection molding and the Arium to that body and give you all the customization. I think it's a really smart business model and it seems like they're doing well. So great job, Aristides. I think they're really cool, but nothing can really be cooler than a Parker Fly. Let's just be honest here. You know what? It's almost like the movie The Dark Knight starring Heath Ledger as the Joker. It's very, very unfortunate that he passed away after playing that role. But as sad as that is, the fact that he died afterward almost makes the role seem even more special, right? Think about someone like Kurt Cobain. Amazing, amazing, amazing. One of my favorites, right? Tragic, tragic death. But the fact that he died basically in his prime, again, same thing with Jimi Hendrix, it almost adds to the mystique of the particular artist. And that's kind of how I feel about the Parker Fly guitars. They had a very, very short prime followed by a decline. And the fact that we still have some of them here today, like this one that's in mint condition that plays amazingly well, it adds to the specialness of the instrument and its place in guitar history. And of course, if you want to learn more about either one of these guitars, you can watch the Aristides video or you can watch the dedicated Parker Fly video right here next. Also, check out my free newsletter, link below. And of course, oneguitarcourse.com for all of your guitar learning needs.